This is Changemakers with Katie Goar, finding the right solutions for the affordable housing community.
This week's Changemaker is Kevin Campbell, the Executive Director of the Raleigh Area Land Trust. Kevin is a visionary leader who has dedicated his entire career to transforming communities through affordable homeownership. With decades of experience, Kevin has worked from real estate to finance and nonprofit sectors. He brings proven strategies to ensure families in Wake County have access to stable, affordable houses. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you. It's one of my favorite topics, so eager to jump into it.
It's an honor to have you here. I'm so excited. We were kind of briefly talking in the beginning here before we went live about the dynamics of Raleigh. Think you guys call it the tech triangle, research triangle.
Research
There's
triangle.
always been that growth dynamic.
Yeah.
So you guys, I guess, have been experiencing this for a longer duration than a lot of these other cities. So tell us the research triangle. With lots of growth, rising housing costs, what's going on in this market? Since we're talking in the analytics portion of this conversation here.
Yeah. So I personally have lived in Raleigh since 2004, so a little over 20 years, and the growth has been really constant, over that time. And it's a very diverse economy. You mentioned the technology sectors and so forth, a really diverse and strong economy. And I think looking back, when you look at the crash of the economy in 2008, 2009, Raleigh didn't experience that to the extreme. There was some drop in property values. I was at Habitat for Humanity at the time, and we actually did take advantage of making some good land purchases at that time at a lower rate that then helped sustain us toward the future with some affordable sites. But what you have, now I would call it a perfect storm of unaffordability, with the shortage of supply against the demand, and you're really seeing it in almost every part of the country. And Raleigh would be one of the leaders, I guess, in that lack of supply. Um, you have that. You have higher interest rates than we were used to for several decades, and then you just have a strong population growth. So we have a really high loss of affordable units. Either they're being demolished and replaced with a higher cost unit, or else they're just able to fetch higher rents. And that's so not only are we not adding a level of affordable units for the population growth, but we're also looking at that loss of affordable units. And that's where the community land trust model of Raleigh Area Land Trust really appeals to me, because we're not just thinking about home ownership for that current buyer, that family that you're working with right now that wants to buy the home, but you're thinking down the road, and how do we keep affordable units in place, in Raleigh and in the county, and not have people to feel like they have to go further out, away from their work and so forth, and away from the good schools of Wake County to, to afford housing and all that means. So, it's the numbers are big, and I think in Raleigh right now, just in the city of Raleigh, they're saying that we're 37,000 affordable units short,
Wow.
and that could grow to, I think, 110,000 over the next few years if that's not addressed. And there are a lot of great organizations, I think great elected officials and municipal leaders that are on board, but I'm not seeing anything yet to address numbers like that. Still something that needs to come.
You are our first community land trust on the podcast. So I want to talk about that model specifically too. Um, just start us real basic. What is it? How it works? And why it's so unique to do what you're doing in Raleigh. Like why that model is so unique.
The community land trust model, actually started in the 1960s. And I'm just learning this history as well. It also is out of the civil rights movement in Albany, Georgia, where what was happening there was a group in a rural community, a farm community, um, that there were organizers there, civil rights organizers there, that were getting people registered to vote. And certain other people didn't like the fact that they were registering to vote. And so they were evicting them from their sharecropping land. And so I've seen the video where this organizer was like, here I am trying to get people empowered through, voting, but they're losing their land and their livelihood. So he went out and organized, and they bought some thousands of acres to and created the first community land trust. And and it was rural land, but it was to do housing and to do farming. And I won't go into their long story, but they had a lot of resistance to that. But that was the birth of the movement in 1968. And then you would see community land trust even in our area in Durham, North Carolina, and Chapel Hill, North Carolina. They've had land trust around since the 90s, but a lot of growth lately. Like us at the Raleigh Area Land Trust, a lot of growth in the last decade. So that there are now, I think, 315 community land trust organizations in the country. In North Carolina, we have 12. And like I said, most of them are new like us. And then now over 16,000 homes in the land trust portfolio. So I always say here, this is a new model to Raleigh, but it's not a new model. It really has some data behind it. And one thing that really excites me about the model is it's a way to give people entry into home ownership. A lot of those people might want to stay in that home and will stay in that home for the rest of their lives. But some might see it as a stepping stone to market rate home ownership. And through the model, which is that a home buyer is buying the home, the trust is retaining ownership of the land, it gives them a lower price point to get into this market. Then we have a shared equity agreement with them so that they're not earning the full equity that a market rate home buyer would have, but they are earning equity. And then the track record of land trusts is that 60% of community land trust buyers move on to market rate home ownership. So that's all about choice, letting people, choose what works for them. And if they want to and are able to move into market rate home ownership and increase the equity that they can build generationally, they're able to do that. If not, if they just want to stay in their community, that. And then the other benefit is, like I said earlier, we're really thinking about the subsequent buyers. So the mathematical model is designed in a way so that even after some years and we pay and we share some equity, that house will still be affordable to the next buyer without additional subsidy. And that's where, especially with local governments, we're seeing a lot of interest for that because they're investing pretty high subsidies in making this homeownership possible. And if they know that unit and our land leases are 99 years are going to stay affordable for many generations, that's really appealing to them for their investment.
I wasn't familiar with how that particular land trust model was originated. I was actually more familiar with a model that's outside of Detroit, where you had so much disinvestment
Yes.
from the major employers that there was just huge tracts of land
Mhm.
just sitting. And so they used the land bank or a land trust to kind of pull that into a potential development area. So I guess, whatever the reason is behind how land trusts are created, or it doesn't change the fact that why they're needed, right? Um, so
That's right. And I think if you can get, land trust properties in land trusts while you still have some affordability, it makes it
Mhm,
so much easier.
mhm.
Yeah, that's one wish I would have in Raleigh. I wish we were 10 or 20 years earlier,
Yeah,
getting started and preserving that affordability.
yeah. So I'm curious as to what is the guiding decision making when you go to acquire that land. In the example I used outside of Detroit, they just had tons of land, and so they
Mhm.
could pretty much pick whatever whenever. But in your case, yeah, you've got a different dynamic. So what are some of those guiding decisions when you go out to either purposely try to get one or an opportunity is brought to you?
Yeah, opportunity is a great word. I always think of it that way. I think as an organization, we have to be poised to jump on any opportunities that come because they're kind of few and far between. And then it's really to just do the numbers work. Can we
Yeah.
make the numbers work
Times.
through, the cost of development, acquisition of land, cost of development, um, subsidies that are available. We do call on down payment assistance subsidies that
Hmm.
help address the gap between the market cost of the house and the affordable price point. And we have those at the city, county, and state level. Those down payment
Right.
assistance programs, they're critical in that. So I always feel like almost that if site becomes available, it's almost to me like somebody needs to talk me out of it because there just aren't that many opportunities
Yeah.
to make work. So
Yeah.
that's really kind of how I look at it. I don't think we need to get too nuanced about it. We also for Raleigh's in the center of Wake County, and employment is really scattered around the county and also into other counties with the Research Triangle Park. So there's not your traditional like employment in the center and residences outside. So we're also interested. We've started with our first few homes in Raleigh, but we're also branching out to other municipalities. We have 10 other municipalities in the county. And we seek to really work with all of them and provide housing, throughout the county. And I'm sure we'll have, interest in buyers in all of those places.
Hmm. So, are you only taking shovel-ready locations, or have you guys started dabbling in some of those brown and type of tracts of
Yeah,
land?
I think it's a mix for sure. So our first 4 units that we have um, purchased, well, two were existing homes. So we just bought 2 existing homes that were on the market. It was a friendly seller who liked our mission, and we invested probably $30,000 of upgrade to those homes. They were probably built in the 70s, and they were our first 2 homes in the land trust. And that's in Raleigh. And then we just bought 2 brand new townhomes that were built by a for-profit builder with a commitment to about a quarter of them being sold to affordable buyers. And we were able to put together some funds to buy 2 of those, also in Raleigh. And then we've been working for a couple years. We were awarded a little over 1 acre piece of land near downtown Raleigh by the city of Raleigh that used to be um, housing. It used to be affordable housing. The site's been vacant, buildings demolished for at least 20 years. I've never seen it with buildings on it. And we were awarded that to develop 18 new homes. So um, that's a raw land development. We will be doing all of the site development, all of the infrastructure, and building the 18 homes there. And that's really significant. It's in a neighborhood that is traditionally a neighborhood for African American homeowners, and over time experienced some disinvestment, and but then lately rapid gentrification. Just it's like you wouldn't recognize the neighborhood from 5 years ago, with units being torn down, replaced by modern architecture homes, larger homes, and so forth. So to be able to carve out an acre here and you know be able to develop 18 houses, we have a great partnership there with a man named Lavelle Moten. He actually grew up on this piece of land
Oh,
in
wow.
his grandmother's house. He's now the head men's basketball coach at North Carolina Central University, and we're working with him and some of his friends from growing up in developing this, working together. So we're just super pleased to have them as partners and helping hold on to that legacy of what that neighborhood meant to them and be able to continue that.
Yeah. It's great when you can get local developers. I think some communities have positioned very, very well because they have that local flavor, design, heritage, imprinting, and, quite frankly, they have a lot of buy-in. It's, more than just the bottom line, isn't it?
It is, and I think, with that gentrification, you find, longtime generational residents that almost now don't feel at home, in their community. It's changed so much. And so we're engaging a neighborhood committee on an art installation for the development that will the art will reflect on the history, and we're having that process informed by those longtime residents. So it's nice to have those components. It's not just sticks and bricks or numbers on a
Right,
page.
right. Right. I mean, it's a book of business. It's a real estate transaction.
Yeah.
You're dealing with the market of what the pricing is and how much it's going to cost you to do what you have to do. But it's great when the community can have so much of a voice into how that happens. Uh,
Absolutely.
spe-
Yeah.
Speaking of how that happens, how are people? I mean, I can assume that your list of people wanting to come into the program obviously is much longer than the, amount of inventory you have, but how are people coming in to the organization? Just speak to some of that about the
Yeah,
model.
it's you're right, and it's really word of mouth and travels quickly. Um, and I'm used to that even with my time too with Habitat for Humanity, very similar. So we've not aggressively pursued um, homeownership candidates because of our volume is so small.
Right.
But we are building and getting ready for that. When as soon as we, I think, start construction, hopefully this summer on those 18 units, we'll be more aggressive pushing that out. And you're right, the demand will be far beyond the supply there. And we want our process to be a fair one, and we want to give neighborhood residents some preference. So we've built that into our evaluation scoring process, so that they do get some credit for being neighborhood residents there. And then, really a financial qualification process. And we have a group of lenders that we work with that, have community land trust lending, mortgage lending products. So it becomes that eventually, it's getting qualified for a mortgage and being under certain income levels. In that development, the city of Raleigh didn't require, they wanted to extend homeownership to as low of an income group as they could. So usually we would serve families that are earning 80% or less of area median income. But in that development, the city wanted half of the units to go to families under 50% of the median and half to under 60%. And, that it requires more subsidy. But there, a lot of people in that group that really never get a homeownership opportunity. So that's exciting.
And for Raleigh, give us an idea of how much what is the salary, that you're talking about that
Yeah,
they're
we
wanting?
we use this area median income, and they're figures established by HUD each year. And that area median income, and it varies based on family size, but for a family of four, the area median income, the 100% is about 120,000. So 80% is 100,000, and 60% is about 60,000. So we were talking about families earning under 100,000 for our general product, but in that specific development, half earning under 60,000 and half earning under 50,000 for that family size. So those, that area mean income has just exploded since COVID, I would say. I mean, before I went to Puerto Rico, it was maybe 85,000. Now it's 120,000. So, and you see, a lot of income gains in certain segments, but not a lot of income gain in the lower, like in the lower income, minimum wage kind of jobs and so forth, haven't experienced that.
Mhm. And we're talking about, the salary compared to the rent too, because the buying power has changed with all the rents going up. I mean, it's a tension that a lot of people know, but I think when you work through it and you say, okay, if you have a single mom teacher, making X, 50% of the salary is going to rent. And so, can you get them positioned into a home ownership product where it's not, you know, every 2 page every 2 weeks, they're paying everything to go to rent, and so I think, what you're offering here is a way to get them out of that higher, really unsustainable, I mean, you can't make car repairs, right? You can't you're on a payment plan, at the doctor's office if you're paying 50% of your income in rent, and so what you're offering is a solution to be able to get them into home ownership, with down payment assistance because you can't save for a down payment if everything's going to rent. So, it's
That's
really a
one thing, one thing I always hear. I mean, over all the years, talking with lots of hundreds of families that are seeking homeownership, there are two things they always say. One is they're looking for stability in that monthly payment.
Yep.
And, even we used this is one of our first two home buyers. She had been renting her townhouse for 17 years, same townhouse. And she was used to an annual increase, maybe $20.
Yeah,
But then recently, it's $300,
yeah,
with 1 month's notice.
yep.
And she even tried to buy that unit and couldn't. Um,
Mm,
and so it just was great timing that we came along and connected with her. And, she was that, but that's stability is one thing. The other thing that people always say is, I want an asset to leave to my kids.
yep,
So important. A lot of us, me included, take that for granted, but it's
yep.
so important. And the land lease, uh, allows for that. It has transferability to the estate.
Plus, it allows the transferability, it allows the lower costs we mentioned, but you're also allowed to package the down payment assistance, which I think is what's so missing for people, who are in this, scenario that we just discussed. Because people do like to save money, but there are certain dynamics when you're paying that much in rent, you just can't save money. So I saw or I read about in recent move-in. We're talking about the people who are needing the housing and the people who are moving in, and I want to put a little bit of flavor around that in context. There was a particular Army veteran that purchased his first home through you guys.
Mr.
Do
Ralston. Yeah.
Okay, you know exactly who I'm talking about. Um, Tell us about the success of that moment and what it was like.
Yeah. The actual process, it was before I joined in this role, but I had served on the board previously and I've talked to him numerous times since. And, I just wish I could introduce you to him and you could see his house. He is so proud of this house. Of all things, it was in the neighborhood he grew up in. And he had moved around Raleigh. He'd always been in Raleigh, but he was able to become a homeowner in the neighborhood he grew up in. And he's just so proud to show everyone he built with his own hands an amazing deck. It has a beautiful backyard. Um, and he always is saying to us, let me know how I can help you in any way. I'm happy to speak of that. He was our very first buyer, and he's very proud to be the first one. And, what he always says when he bought the house 2 years ago, he was 62. And he said, I thought it would never happen. I thought I was too old. And he was doing property management work for another affordable housing organization that had a home ownership center. And they kept encouraging him. And their home ownership center is our partner in getting people qualified for our homes. And so again, it was just providential kind of timing, for him. And he was single when he bought the house. He's getting married anytime now. Um, and he manages his money so well because it means so much to him. And I don't know more to say. I just wish everybody could meet him. He's so delightful and really expresses, in a humble way, the difference that's making even late in life.
Mhm. Yeah, there's something about becoming a first-time home buyer, that you hear a lot of people say that they've arrived,
Uh-huh.
right? And it's it could be the perception of stability, it could be the perception of just, an attainable financial step, but, there is definitely a settling within the community, within themselves, and within their spheres of influence. And so it's a unique, home ownership has kind of gotten um, a different twist as far as who has access to it, or where it is, or what the price points are, or the tension, if you need a new roof, some of those things. But it doesn't take away from what it has the potential to be for the individual who becomes a first-time home buyer.
Yeah, I think it's so much more than transactional. It's easy to kind of reduce it to that,
Yeah.
like to a financial transaction, but I think you hit the nail on the head. I remember one in my first few years working in Virginia in affordable housing. I remember having a closing on a house, and the home buyer was maybe a 30-year-old single mom, and her mother was there. And I still remember her mother saying, I always knew Cheryl would make it. And
Yeah.
that was that
Yep.
you said that, that attainment uh, probably was the first person in her extended family to get to that point.
Yeah.
How important that is, how empowering that is.
Yeah. Yeah. Just a side tangent here. When my husband and I bought our first home, it was all we could afford. Tiny, like, falling apart kind of a house. Plumbing wasn't working, all these kinds of things. But we bought it in a rough neighborhood where, SWAT teams and dogs and, all of this was going on right across the street from us. And, I look back on that, it's been over 30 years ago or so ish. Um, and, it was not a great investment. It was not a great neighborhood. It was really rough. Um, and we just bought, we didn't know any better. We were young and we just bought what we could afford. But, we were young and without kids too. So, we weren't looking at how bad the school was. We weren't looking about how, the drug dogs were scoping through the neighborhood. But swap out the single mother with kids and all she can afford concept, and there's a lot more societal implications to that, isn't there?
There is, you make me think about, well, another thing that we're working on now. We're working with a for-profit builder, and they are in North Carolina. Inclusionary zoning is not allowed in by the state,
Okay.
so it has to be voluntary. But this builder is offering some affordable units in their market rate development, and it's just that integration. Our first one with them will have 2 units out of about 50, and then we have another one with them coming up 10 units out of 200. In that, well, they're in a market rate community where the
Yeah.
market selling price will be probably 500,000.
Yeah.
But that builder is going to sell the units to us at the same price that our affordable buyer can buy it. So we don't have to invest any capital in it. And then these families are getting access to great locations, some amenities, also great, some of the best schools in the county. And, going forward, I just think that's such a model of
Yeah.
not not segregating affordable housing off into certain
Right,
places, but
right.
really integrating it, and I just think to the benefit of everyone to create those kind of communities.
If another community or housing authority wanted to start a land trust, what do you think would be some of the ways that they should start exploring that? Or what do you point to as some of the ingredients that helped you guys, be so successful with this?
We had two things come to mind. We had an individual, uh, his name is Rhett, and he's still with us. He's an individual who just got interested in this idea. He's a transportation engineer in
Mhm.
Raleigh, and he just felt the need for affordable housing and loved this model, and he just started socializing it as to everybody. And so he gets a lot of credit in that. And then I was going to also say there's a national network of community land trusts that we
Okay.
belong to called the Grounded Solutions Network, and they have collected over the years a lot of data from the network, and they can really help build the case and also do some consulting around startups. So kind of like you don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's been
Right.
done before, and we called on them. The largest land trust by number of units in the country is in Burlington, Vermont, of all places.
Hmm.
And they have, I think, over 3,000 units, and they have spun off a consulting group. And we actually worked with them. They came to Raleigh and helped us through, really all the considerations that you need to consider. The third thing I would add there is investment. Um, to be well invested or capitalized to start with just enables you to take advantage of opportunities and move quicker. And I wouldn't say that we were well capitalized. So it just makes things slower. And it also
Mhm.
is in a hot market, it's hard to compete, with cash buyers and so forth. If we're using like government funds to purchase land, often we will get reimbursed for that. So we have to have some bridge funding to make it
Yeah.
work, all that. So those things I think are important. And, we're seeing that now in North Carolina. The city of Greensboro, I think, is the third largest city in the state. Their actual city staff is forming a land trust that they intend to spin off to be independent at some point. But the city, stepped up and said, we need this mechanism
Mhm.
here. And they have a little more affordable environment, but they know they're
Right.
losing affordability quickly.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, hopefully they're in front of the dynamics here
yeah.
because that's the key for what you're doing. Well, I really appreciate you being on the podcast here. Housing and solving this affordable housing crunch isn't going to take a one size fits all, and we're going to have to look at lots of different formats and forums and models. So, what you're bringing to the table and what you're doing there in Raleigh is crucial. So, hopefully, these other communities like Greensboro and that they will jump in as well. So I've been talking with Kevin Campbell, the executive director of the Raleigh Area Land Trust. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you for connecting. We appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Changemakers with Katie Goar. To find out more about Katie, go to quadel.com. That's QUADEL.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.